My dream house came with a nightmare. A perfect neighbor who was also a petty tyrant with a badge. He thought he could intimidate anyone, but he had no idea who he was really messing with. The keys felt heavy in my hand, but not in a bad way. It was the weight of accomplishment, the physical manifestation of late nights, skipped lunches, and years of dreaming. My own house, in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, with manicured lawns and kids' bikes left carelessly on the sidewalk. It was the picture of the American dream my parents had always talked about. After a grueling week of packing and hauling, the moving truck had finally pulled away, leaving me standing on my very own porch, a little sweaty, a lot tired, but buzzing with a deep, satisfying joy. The neighborhood seemed perfect. A little too perfect, maybe. The kind of place where every blade of grass stood at attention, and the mailboxes were all uniformly pristine. As I started the monumental task of unboxing, I couldn't help but notice the eyes. From across the street, a man was meticulously washing his immaculate SUV, but his gaze kept flicking over to my house. He had that classic suburban dad look, crisp polo shirt, khaki shorts, and a face that seemed permanently pinched in mild disapproval. I gave a friendly wave. He responded with a curt nod before turning a high-pressure hose on a tire that was already sparkling. Okay, not the warmest welcome, but I figured people needed time to adjust to a new face. The next day, I was trying to bring some life to the generic landscaping, planting a few vibrant azalea bushes my mom had given me as a housewarming gift. I was on my knees, wrestling with a stubborn root, when I felt his presence. I looked up. It was Mr. Khaki Shorts from across the street, now standing on the edge of his lawn, arms crossed, watching me. "That moving truck scuffed up the edge of my lawn yesterday," he said, his voice flat. There was no hello, no welcome to the neighborhood. I stood up, wiping dirt on my jeans. "Oh man, I'm really sorry about that. The driver was having a tough time with the turn. I'll get some seed and patch it up for you this afternoon." He grunted. "See that you do. This neighborhood has standards. We like to keep things neat." He gestured vaguely at my pile of flattened cardboard boxes stacked by the garage, a clear look of distaste on his face. This guy, I thought, was going to be a real treat. I just smiled politely, said I'd take care of it, and went back to my gardening. I wasn't going to let one sour neighbor ruin my dream. The real trouble started a few hours later. It was a sweltering afternoon, and the sun was beating down relentlessly. I was finishing up with the last azalea bush, right near the property line between my yard and his. He was out again, this time with his industrial-strength power washer, blasting every microscopic speck of dust from his pristine concrete driveway. The roar of the machine was obnoxious, but I just put in my earbuds and tried to focus on my work. That's when I felt it. A sudden, shocking spray of ice-cold water hit me square in the back. It wasn't a gentle mist that had drifted over. It was a concentrated, forceful jet that soaked through my t-shirt and sent a shiver down my spine. I gasped, dropping my trowel and spinning around. He was standing there, the power washer wand in his hand, pointed directly at the ground near my feet. A slow, smug smirk spread across his face. "Whoops," he said, his voice dripping with mock innocence. "Slippery when wet." He then deliberately angled the nozzle and gave my new azalea bush a hard blast, sending soil and mulch flying everywhere. My mom's flowers. My blood went from cold to boiling in a nanosecond. I stood up, water dripping from my hair into my eyes, and took a step toward him. "What the hell is your problem?" His smirk widened. He switched off the power washer, and the sudden silence was deafening. "My problem," he said, taking a deliberate step onto my lawn, "is people who don't respect property. People who don't belong. You come in here, tear up my lawn, pile up your trash. This is a nice, quiet neighborhood." "I told you I would fix the lawn," I said, my voice dangerously low. "And those are moving boxes that are getting picked up tomorrow. You soaked me and my property on purpose." "Prove it," he sneered, and then he delivered the line he'd clearly been waiting for. He puffed out his chest and his whole demeanor changed, becoming colder, more menacing. "You should learn your place. It's my job to deal with troublemakers. I'm Officer Miller." He tapped a finger on his chest as if he were wearing a badge, which he wasn't. "And you, my friend, are trespassing on my last nerve." My mind raced. A cop. Of course he was a cop. The entitlement, the smug superiority, the immediate escalation to a threat, it all clicked into place. He thought his badge gave him a free pass to harass and intimidate me. He thought I was just some guy he could push around. He was still smirking, waiting for me to shrink, to apologize, to cower. I didn't do any of those things. I simply stared back at him, my expression unreadable. I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "What are you going to do?" he scoffed. "Call the cops? I am the cops. Genius." "No," I said, my thumb unlocking the screen. "I don't need to call the cops." I looked him dead in the eye, held the phone up to my ear, and let it ring once before a voice answered. Miller's smug expression was frozen on his face, waiting for the punchline. He got one, just not the one he was expecting. I cleared my throat and spoke into the phone, my voice steady and clear, never breaking eye contact with him. "Hey, Chief. Sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but we have a problem." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Officer Miller's smirk didn't so much fade as it did shatter. His face cycled through a Rolodex of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, then a flicker of dawning, horrified comprehension. He was a bully used to a certain rhythm, a dance of intimidation where he led and others followed. I had just thrown a wrench in his choreography. "Chief of what?" he stammered, trying to recover his swagger, but his voice was a wet squeak. "Chief of the Lawnmower Association?" I ignored him, keeping my eyes locked on his. "Yes, sir. It's my first day here. A real welcoming committee." I paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "His name is Miller. Officer Miller," he says. I watched the last bit of color drain from Miller's face like water down a sink. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. The power washer wand hung limply in his hand, a toy he'd forgotten he was holding. "Yes, sir, that's what I thought," I said into the phone. No physical contact. He just used his power washer on me and my property. Claimed it was an accident, then started making threats about how he deals with troublemakers." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Miller's head, the frantic search for an escape route that wasn't there. The voice on the other end of the phone, my voice of reason for the past 5 years, became louder, more distinct. It was Chief Reynolds, a man whose respect I had earned not in a suburban cul-de-sac, but in courtrooms and deposition rooms. A man I had prepped for dozens of high-stakes civil rights cases. A man who knew exactly who I was and what I did for a living. "He wants to talk to you," I said flatly, holding the phone out to Miller. My new neighbor stared at my phone like it was a venomous snake. His hand trembled as he reached for it. He brought it to his ear, his whole body rigid with tension. Chief Reynolds? Sir?" His voice was now stripped of all its earlier bravado, replaced with the panicked deference of a subordinate caught red-handed. I couldn't hear what the chief was saying, but I didn't need to. I could read it on Miller's face. His eyes widened, his jaw went slack. He started stammering, a torrent of pathetic excuses. "Sir, it was a complete misunderstanding. I was just washing my driveway. He's new to the neighborhood. I was just explaining the standards. No, sir, of course not, sir. I would never." It was almost pitiful to watch. This man who, seconds earlier, had been puffing out his chest and talking about putting me in my place, was now visibly shrinking, crumbling under the disembodied voice of his superior. Just as I was starting to think this would be over quickly, the front door of Miller's house flew open. A woman with a fierce expression and a carbon copy of Miller's entitled posture stormed out onto their perfect lawn. "Dan, what's going on? Who is this?" she demanded, pointing a finger at me. Miller frantically waved a hand at her, trying to shush her while still listening to the chief. "Sarah, not now," he hissed, his face pale with panic. But Sarah was not a "not now" kind of person. She marched right up to the edge of the lawn, her eyes blazing. "I saw you," she shrieked at me. "I saw you out here antagonizing my husband, yelling at him. You come into our neighborhood and you think you can just threaten people. We have kids here." I just stood there, my arms crossed, saying nothing. I didn't have to. The entire unhinged performance was being broadcast live into the ear of the chief of police. Miller looked like he was about to have a stroke. "Sarah, for the love of God, be quiet," he screamed, his eyes darting between his wife, me, and the sky, as if hoping for divine intervention. "Don't you tell me to be quiet, Dan," she snapped back, completely misreading the situation. "I'm not going to let this person harass my family." I calmly walked over and plucked my phone from Miller's limp, sweaty hand. He didn't even resist. I put it back to my ear. "Chief, you still there?" Chief Reynolds's voice was calm, but it had a new, harder edge to it. "I heard all of it, Marcus. Every word." He paused, and in that short silence the whole situation shifted. It was no longer just about a disciplinary action for a rogue cop. It was something else now. "Listen to me," he said, his voice dropping low and serious. "I want you to go inside your house right now and lock the door. Don't say another word to them." "Sir?" I asked, a feeling of unease starting to creep up my spine. This was more than I expected. "Just do it," he commanded. "I'm looking at Officer Daniel Miller's file right now. There's something you need to know. His last partner? He filed a formal complaint 3 months ago. Said Miller was unstable, paranoid, and had a habit of making threats. That partner requested an immediate transfer. Now get inside. I'm already on my way." The click of my front door's deadbolt felt like the start of a countdown. I walked straight to the living room window, pulling the blinds aside just enough to see the bizarre tableau unfolding on the lawn. Miller was still standing there, frozen, the color of old chalk. His wife, Sarah, was now directing her tirade at him, her arms flailing, but her words were muffled by the glass. She was clearly demanding to know what was said on the phone, who I was, why her husband suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. He wasn't answering. He was just staring at my house, his eyes wide and vacant. The bully had been stripped of his power, and what was left was just a hollow, pathetic man. I stayed at the window, my heart thumping a steady rhythm against my ribs. Unstable. Paranoid. That's what the chief had said. The words echoed in my head. This wasn't just about a neighborhood dispute anymore. It wasn't about a scuffed lawn or a power washer. This was about a man with a badge and a gun who was, according to his own department's records, a ticking time bomb. And I was living next door. The weight of my new keys suddenly felt a little heavier, a little colder. Less than 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled silently into the cul-de-sac, their lights off. They parked neatly at the curb, one in front of my house, one in front of Miller's. Sarah stopped her rant mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open as 2 uniformed officers got out of the first car. But it was the man who emerged from the second car who commanded the scene. Chief Reynolds was a big man, not just in stature but in presence. He walked with an air of authority that made Miller's earlier posturing look like a child playing dress-up. Chief Reynolds didn't even glance at me or my house. His focus was entirely on Miller. He walked straight up to him, his face an unreadable mask of disappointment and steel. "Dan," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the unnervingly silent street. "Give me your badge and your service weapon. Now." Sarah gasped, a theatrical, hand-to-her-chest kind of gasp. "What? Chief, you can't be serious. This is because of him, isn't it?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at my window. The chief completely ignored her. He just kept his eyes on Miller. Slowly, like a man in a dream, Miller unclipped the badge from his belt. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely manage the simple task. He fumbled with the holster of his off-duty weapon, his movements clumsy and defeated. He handed both items to one of the other officers. "You're on administrative leave, effective immediately," the chief stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Internal Affairs will be in touch on Monday. I suggest you get a lawyer. Go inside your house. Don't speak to your neighbor. Don't speak to anyone." Miller, speechless and broken, turned and shuffled toward his front door, his wife sputtering in his wake. As he disappeared inside, Chief Reynolds finally turned and walked across my lawn. I met him at the door. He sighed, running a hand over his face. He looked tired. "Marcus, welcome to the neighborhood, I guess. I'm so sorry about this." "It's not your fault, Chief," I said. "But unstable? You knew this guy was a problem." "We had a complaint, yes," he admitted, his gaze direct. and we had him in counseling and on desk duty. He was supposed to be on a short leash. But this is a different level. Harassing a civilian at his home, making threats, that's the end of his career. And thanks to you, it's the end of it before he hurt someone. He looked back at Miller's house. His wife's call to dispatch claiming you were threatening him probably didn't help his case either. We stood there for a moment in the fading afternoon light. The roar of the power washer was gone, replaced by the gentle hum of a perfect suburb settling in for the evening. The 2 patrol cars pulled away, leaving just the chief's car behind. "You know," I said, a small smile touching my lips, "I'm a civil rights attorney, Chief. My firm specializes in police misconduct cases. When Miller called himself an officer and started throwing his weight around, he wasn't just splashing water on a new neighbor." A look of understanding dawned on the chief's face, followed by a wry grin. He shook his head slowly. Of all the lawns in all the world, he had to pick the one belonging to the lawyer who has probably sued my department 6 times. "Something like that," I chuckled. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, Marcus, let me be the first to officially say it. Welcome to the neighborhood. I have a feeling things are going to be a lot quieter from now on." And as he walked back to his car, I looked at my new house, at the azalea bushes that were a little muddy but still standing, and I knew he was right. My dream house was finally going to be the peaceful place I'd always wanted it to be.